My name is Rebecca Blanton, and I am a junior at Westminster College studying Peace and Conflict Studies. Peace and Conflict Studies is a custom major that combines political science and communication. And I am very excited today to be able to share with you my research and paper presentation in organizational communication for the Undergraduate Research Conference 2020. Woohoo! So let's get started. I want to begin with a presentation outline of what I'm going to be talking about today. So we'll start with a little bit of context as to how my research in this area kind of came about, how the paper I'm going to be presenting kind of formed. Then we'll talk a little bit more broadly about some of the context and history around communication in workplaces, in the restaurant industry, and then we'll talk about more specifically management communication and communication strategies at a specific Utah fast casual restaurant. And then we'll end with a conclusion and some recommendations regarding communication strategies. So, this paper that I'm presenting was originally written for COM 350 Organizational Communication with Cassandra Himpo. I took this class in fall of this last year, and it was a really great experience. And the paper was kind of the final assignment for the class, and we had the opportunity to really draw on outside workplace involvement that we had had in the past and tie that with the kind of theoretical knowledge that we had gained throughout the whole semester in the class. So it was a really cool way to kind of combine a personal experience with more academic understanding. So that's how this ethnographic case study about the management communication strategies in a specific fast casual restaurant in Utah came to be. So, talking in general about communication in the fast casual restaurant industry, I feel like in terms of understanding this, I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of communication in workplaces, the distribution of power in workplaces. So, with the Industrial Revolution and moving from more agrarian societies to service societies, there's really a shift in kind of the focus of how people gathered together for work. There was much more focus put on productivity, on producing a large amount of product. Capitalism was really centralized into our work systems, and so that really led to hierarchically organized workforces and more concentration of power at the top. So, tying this into the fast casual restaurant industry, that means that in a lot of restaurants, managers have power over organizational communication and the strategies that are used in their workforces. So this involves things such as internal and external communication. Internal being like, how are employees encouraged to talk together? What are the outlets that they can? How are managers talking to employees? External would be like, how are people within the organization communicating with people outside, like customers or partners? Things like conflict management. How are conflicts being addressed? Decisions. How are decisions being made within the organizations? Who's making them? What's the process for making them? How are employees trained? How are they brought in? How are they trained throughout their time in the organization? And managers really have a lot of power over what communication policies and procedures are put in place regarding these things. So, moving on to specific management communication at a Utah fast casual restaurant. So I wanted to highlight kind of 4 areas that I looked at in my paper that are training, decision-making, conflict management, and internal formal communication. So training is incredibly important in terms of developing a strong and productive workforce. And it's really important that managers are the ones that facilitate a really effective process for bringing folks into an organization and making them feel like they know what they need to know to be successful. So at the organization that I studied, managers, their kind of strategy for assimilating people into the workforce was basically just come on in and jump in and learn as you go. And while this was a really quick method for getting people into the organization, it wasn't very good at making people feel like they were being set up to succeed. This resulted in a lot of people doing things differently, which lowered the consistency of the product going out to customers, and it also just made employees feel like not valued by the managers and not like they were really being set up to be able to succeed. So training is a really important thing for managers to consider in their communication strategies. Another important thing that managers need to consider is decision making. So some literature that I read in my class, Miller 2015, the reference will be at the end of my presentation. In that book, she talked about how, it's fall 2020, it was a little bit away, talked about how a lot of decisions that managers make in workplaces tend to fail because they don't consider the perspectives of employees. And they talk about kind of this idea of a workplace democracy, where everyone in the organization is considered to have some value in terms of contributing to decisions that are made. And they also talk about this backstage communication idea where employees sort of have this really in-depth understanding of what happens, why things may fail, why things may not work the way you think they are. And so when managers just have their manager meetings and exclude employees and don't have any way to solicit information from them, that can lead to ineffective decisions. And at the organization that I worked at, this was definitely true. It was definitely feeling that the employees' understandings about the organization weren't ever really considered in the decisions processes that were taking place. And this kind of led to some rifts between the employees and the managers when managers would be like, yeah, this problem's been happening and here's our solution. And employees would be like, we already knew this was happening and we thought about this solution, but you didn't ask us about this solution. So it's definitely an important thing for managers to consider the dynamic with their employees in terms of how they're making their decisions. So then, conflict management. When you bring a lot of people together, there's going to be conflict. And how managers work to deal with conflict within organizations is incredibly important. And it can kind of set the tone for how employees themselves may go about dealing with conflict. There are many different conflict styles, including avoiding, competing, collaborating, and whichever decision managers choose to kind of implement themselves and for the organization as a whole is going to have a large impact. Now, at the organization that I studied, conflicts were really not addressed openly. They were kind of like shoved under the rug. If an employee had a negative experience with another employee, there wasn't really any way for to kind of stop and have like those people sit down, have a manager facilitate anything. Everything was so go, go, go that there wasn't really the ability to kind of clear the air with things. And then secondly, some employees felt like managers themselves were starting conflict with other employees. And so that is definitely a difficult situation to be in. And when it comes to considering how managers are using their power in terms of how they shape the organizational culture through their communication with their employees and other managers, definitely not something that's going to help the organization work very efficiently. And then lastly, formal internal communication. So when we talk about formal communication in the comm department, that really comes down to things that are like written down, things that are produced that aren't just like, you know, you're chatting with someone and you just say it. Think about like a website or a training program. That's kind of more of a thing of formal communication. And at the organization that I worked at, there was really not a lot of formal communication from the managers to the employees. There was one retreat that I witnessed at the time that I was there, and there was like a whiteboard behind the like area that customers couldn't see. But often that whiteboard wasn't utilized, and the training didn't last very long, and there weren't really like any printed materials that anyone got, and so there was just not a lot of opportunities for employees to get information from managers besides just occasionally if they were chatting with a manager, and so that really led to inequities too in what employees knew about what was happening within the organization. So take, for example, some of the employees that were more busy in their roles, or like the folks that worked on the grill versus the folks that were working in the dining hall. There was different disparities, and some employees also got along better with the managers due to shared identities. And so it was then left up to just informal processes what employees knew about what was happening in the organization. And that didn't lead to a very quality team building or just a team vibe within the organization. So it's important for managers to consider what are their more formal ways of communicating with their employees internally. So moving to recommendations. These just kind of stem naturally from the 4 categories that I just talked about. So in terms of role development and training, it's important for managers to consider a variety of methods to get information to their employees about their roles, rather than just throwing them off the job and hoping that they get it from another employee. They could write things down, they could have a more formal training program, do something online. There's a lot of different ways in order to try to bring people into an organization and make them feel like they're a part of it. In terms of decision making, valuing employee perspectives, actively trying to seek out their feedback so that there's kind of a feeling of consensus, or at least consideration, when decisions are made by managers within organizations. Then in terms of conflict management, working to address conflicts when they come up, as well as just considering the importance of a safe organizational environment. And then going beyond informal verbal communication, just chatting with employees, and really utilizing creative ways to formally give information to employees, interact with them, whether that be through a group meet or through like sending out group texts or writing things down in a certain area or having more meetings at the beginning of shifts or after shifts. All important things for creating a positive work environment in the fast casual restaurant industry. So that is my presentation. If I can get to that slide, thank you so much for listening. I hope you all stay safe and healthy, and here are my references.